Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Wisdom Wednesday. I'm Dr. Susanna Alter.
And Dr. Benjamin here.
And in these mindset calls, we cover the topics of innate peace, innate wisdom, innate well-being through the lens of mind, thought, and consciousness. And I love today's topic, which is to stop judging judgments. And stop judging yourself for judging your judgments.
Yeah.
And the list could go on.
So we're going to explore the topic of judgments, what they really are. And I think it's safe to say that we all want to be more free from judgment, whether it's casting judgment on others or ourselves, or receiving judgment from others or ourselves. But I think we've got to first kind of understand what the heck a judgment is. And when I think about it, to be quite honest, I feel like it's a really slippery slope. It's like a slimy little thing, and it kind of like slips between your fingertips when you try to hold judgment in your hand. It's like, what is it? What is it? Can you hold it in your hand? Is it real? Or is it just a figment of our collective imaginations? Because that being said, I know what it feels like to feel judged. And I know what it feels like to have judgment against myself or others. But the actual judgment, we were just kind of reflecting, Susanna. It's like sometimes I will hear words that might be kind of quote unquote, might be objectively hard or critic, which is another interesting word, but I don't really feel too bad. But then other points I'm in maybe more of a vulnerable place. I'm a little bit more insecure in my thinking, having a bad day, whatever the reason is. There doesn't need to be a reason. There just is a shift in state of mind, right? And then the words that didn't really affect me or bother me or have anything to do to me, all of a sudden they penetrate and I feel judged. And I guess the only thing that changes in those different scenarios is kind of, again, like the state of mind that I'm in a more vulnerable, susceptible state of mind, or a more resilient, kind of self-aware, grounded state of mind. But ultimately, but yeah, do you have any thoughts?
Sure, but ultimately, I mean, just how can you interrupt yourself after saying ultimately?
Well, I was going to say, ultimately, the judgment, I feel, and maybe this is an opportunity to debate a little, but I feel like the judgment that I feel is ultimately judgment that I have on myself. You know, it's like if someone says, "Hey, Dr. Ben, you're a real dummy," and I feel bad about that statement, ultimately that feeling bad is because I actually do judge myself as being a dummy or unworthy or whatever else I make that statement mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when we're talking about really what is a judgment, simply what it is, let's just make a scenario. It's like a person has thoughts about, let's just say they have thoughts about you, Dr. Ben. There's a person out there who has thoughts about you, and they're not very positive thoughts. They're maybe we will call them judgmental thoughts, right? That is a word that we use. But let's say a person out there has some thoughts and they express those thoughts to you. Hey, Dr. Benjamin, I think that you are a dummy. That's a great example that you already brought up. So really, in that person's reality, they perceive Ben as a dummy.
In that moment,
the only thing that creates that judgment is the thinking. That's all that it is, the thinking. And remember, we've talked in previous episodes about how thoughts are really just formless energy that can persist, for an instant until they fade away unless we cling on to them. But then if those thoughts are then vocalized to you, Ben, you then have this opportunity whether to just see it for what it is, which is, this person's thought, a thought, Or you can also latch onto it and make it mean something and make it be true for you. Oh
Sure.
gosh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, and have it affect you. And we always have that choice, whether we are, when we're on the receiving end of judgments, really. But let's kind of flip it around and let's say that we're the judgmental party, right? And this is something that I think if we all were really honest with ourselves, we would see that, yeah, we're judgment creating beings.
Yeah. And just like the perceptual shift of, someone calls me a name, someone calls you a name, and it either means something or it doesn't, depending on your state of mind. Yeah, if you turn the tables and it's like you say something and you could say, have a nice day. And it's like, have a nice day. Well, if you read that on a piece of paper, that's like, oh, that's nice. But have a nice day. It's like, well, clearly that's kind of like not coming from a nice and cheery place, right? So obviously the energy on which our words that we verbalize ride, you can't argue with what that is, right? But that being said, again, whoever is in on the recipient of those words or energy or hears that, they can make it mean whatever they want, right? So, but I guess there's the opportunity and the responsibility of just conscious humans is to be more self-aware or mindful or whatever it is that you want to call it, of like the energy on which our words are sent. But we do our best. And then we know that the recipient is also a responsible party for receiving that, knowing that we're doing our best. So hopefully we live in a world where at the very least there's some curiosity or understanding that maybe humanity is doing their best, even though sometimes it looks like far from it. But the reality is, like, if we go back, like we always see, we consistently do our best. And yeah, hindsight is always 2020 and we could always do better, right? But who are we to judge our best yesterday? Yesterday was yesterday. Yesterday was not today. Today we're different. Maybe we're quote unquote worse. Maybe we're more judgy. Maybe we're less judgy. We are who we are. So anyway, I think it's turning into a Ben ramble, and I'm going to not judge that. But the other thing that I think is important to just say now is that, like, what happens. What is. But there's always the potential to place a layer of judgment on what is. Whether it's a judgment on how we feel, whether it's a judgment on what we see when we turn on the news or listen to our social media feed or whatever it is, there's always an opportunity to observe what is and place a layer of judgment on it, whether it's a cellophane wrap layer, like thick layer, just this teeny little invisible layer that's just very delicate, or it can be like a brick layer. But we always have the opportunity to place that layer of judgment. And maybe you would argue that it's impossible not to judge, and judge that layer is just our perception. It's just our perspective. And maybe it is. Sometimes we just call it a judgment and sometimes we just call it perception. But like, it's just how we see things in a moment. And maybe it is crisp and clear, like that cellophane wrap, and we can barely tell that it's there. It's just we see clearly through that, and that's our perception. And maybe it is really murky, and it's like we're looking through like 10 feet thick of sludge that we were walking through in the lake the other day. But in any case, I guess maybe that's what judgment is, just our perception, and if it's clear or murky.
I think that really, we're using the word judgment, but we could just be saying thought, because judgments are just thoughts. And, this idea of judging.
Or / perception or whatever.
Right. Whatever word you want to use. And this idea of judging ourselves for having judgments is like saying judging ourselves for having thoughts, which is kind of silly if you think about it, because we're really not in control of what thoughts bubble up, what thoughts come into our mind, right? So, yeah.
And I'm also just reflecting on the fact how judgment, just kind of in an evolutionary, like primal physiologic way, like our ability to judge and discern and discriminate and make use of what all the information we take in is really important. If we're not judgmental, then we're going to let the tiger eat us. We got to be able to judge the tiger as a carnivore and a threat, right? We got to be able to like just be rational. But obviously at some point, that gift of judgment can be really harsh and hurtful and self-sabotaging and disrupts our hormones and physiology and create tension and disease and stress. And it's like we are in control all the time of what we're allowing in terms of how we're judging ourselves. Are we allowing something to penetrate and stick us when we can just stay curious and emotionally kind of grounded and more detached? Or are we going to allow the perception, formless energy, selves or others in a moment, given their state of mind? Are we going to allow that to really make or break our day, or shift our like emotional state, or deflate us? Or nothing is wrong or bad. It's not like you shouldn't do that. You should be more resilient. You should do this. Those are again just more judgments. But it's just an invitation to just sit back and relax as all of the flow of thought and perception happens, without being so entangled and entrenched. Because again, when we are, then there's just more likelihood of just feeling the ill effects of that.
Right. And I'm gonna take this. I know that we could have ended right there, but I'm actually gonna do a little ramble.
Yeah, please, because I don't know how to not ramble.
Because I think it is so interesting to actually consider all of the kind of consequences that can come when we really buy into judgments, whether they're judgments we've heard from other people, or they're judgments we've had about ourselves, or they're judgments we have of other people. For example, if there's judgments we have about someone else and we take them really seriously, like, oh, well, that person is obviously an idiot because they think this thing. Well, then I can't be associated with them. I need to break off this friendship forever. I need to, whatever, there could be infinity, just
infinite.
Thank you. An infinite amount of results that could happen if we really take our self-judgment seriously. Oh, I could never do that. I'm not articulate enough to start a podcast. I'm not this enough to do this. And we take that really seriously. Well, then we're never going to do that. But here's the thing, is that when we really realize that these judgments are just thought, they are just formless energy, and that we actually have the choice whether to take them seriously or not, then, oh my gosh, we actually leave room for, more truthful inspiration to bubble up within ourselves, to guide us throughout life, to help us figure out, our relationships and our purpose in life, and all these other things. But for me, it's like I would much rather have that innate wisdom and intuition guide me throughout life, rather than my judgments to guide me throughout life. That's just my opinion, my preference.
Why not?
But we're all human. We're all human, and innocently, of course, we have moments where we buy into our thinking and judgments, and we shouldn't judge ourselves when that happens.
Yeah. And I guess the moral of the story is only only you, only me, only each unique conscious being is responsible and in charge of those judgments that they cast on oneself or allow to penetrate and make meaning of. Again, you know, if you, so I guess if you, and this is kind of just, I'm talking to myself here, but if you find yourself the victim of judgment more often than you'd like, then why is that? Why is that? Who is doing the judging? Is it your father? Is it your mother? Is it your aunt or uncle or sister or brother? Or is it you? And not saying that so that you create more judgmental thoughts of yourself, thinking that you should be different, thinking that you got to heal that trauma or fix that past or do anything like that. But you can take that layer of judgmental thinking off and see things for what they truly are, and just sit back and relax and enjoy the thinking rather than micromanage and try and fix the thinking and do less or judge less and fix stuff. That's no fun. That, because if you got to fix stuff, that means something's broken or wrong. So there's nothing to fix, which is kind of like just paradoxical and counterintuitive. That it's like when we're talking about like healing and being and letting go of judgments, we're really talking about just being present in the truth of, rather than being caught up in the thought that we might call judgment. So I guess I've done enough rambling. Thank you for rambling a little as well, Dr. Susanna. And thank you for tuning in and, being open to our rambles. And if you have any reflections or feedback, we're here to hear it. So leave it in a comment and feel free to share this with anyone who might be judging you or judging themselves. I'm just kidding, because no one's judging you but you. And also just another announcement that these conversations, not these conversations, but conversations like these happen every week in our Peace on Earth group, where it's not just us rambling, but we're able to have these discussions in the nature of mind, thought, and consciousness more deeply and intimately. So if you'd like to learn more, you can head to alter.health/peace on earth.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next week for another Wisdom